Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and in today's video we're going to take a look at the 10.1 new items, both from the raid and from professions. I have a bigger video coming where I'll just, well, maybe actually probably a smaller video, where I'll read through the patch notes that we've seen so far, and there'll be a little bit of overlap here, but mostly this is going to be just looking through the dungeon journal, looking through the new crafted items, and talking about that. One thing to note as well, I'm unsure if this is intended or how exactly this is supposed to look, but on PTR right now, crafted items that were 418 are now 421. So slightly relevant information if this stays true. You know, these pieces are going to be slightly better than they otherwise would have been, and this might mean that there are a few more potential spark upgrades that exist for your character than otherwise would have. If these pieces end up getting that item level bump coming over to live as well, or maybe this is just an oopsie on PTR, and in which case, all right, well, so let's start taking a look here at the items that drop from the raid. So we're mostly just going to look at trinkets. I'm not going to really look at like, oh, you know, how many leather helmets are there? What stats do they have? But if you are a, you know, leather wearer, if you're anybody, that's probably something that is worth doing for your own, you know, purposes. So consider doing that. But yeah, okay, so let's start off. First boss, Kazara. Now, the item levels aren't implemented yet as far as I can tell. Everything is 441 in here, but presumably we're going to see the same thing. In fact, I'm pretty sure they've said we're going to see the same thing with early bosses having lower item levels and later bosses having higher item levels. So Kazara has, let me just make sure I'm on all classes. Yeah. It has one trinket that drops from it, which is a tank trinket. It's a strength agi tank trinket. Reduces the damage you take, but also reduces your movement speed and dodge chance when you use it. Taking a lot of damage will consume one stack, which deals damage to enemies, and that thing can only proc every 2 seconds, and this will take away your fortified dread slab plating. Now, this trinket, the flat damage reduction on it right now of 7,000, it's not super exciting, but, well, you get 5 stacks of that, so that goes up to a fairly high amount. If you're taking a lot of medium-sized hits from a lot of enemies, this could potentially be quite good in like a Mythic Plus situation, where you're taking a lot of hits, you're reducing a lot of damage, and also you're then getting more value out of that damage, which looks to be uncapped down at the bottom of a Dread Flame Ray, so kind of a cool effect. It is a 2-minute cooldown on use on this thing, so I suspect this thing's going to end up being niche and not particularly good, and I also suspect that if that on use is actually strong and used, it's the kind of thing where they usually nerf those sorts of trinkets anyways, which would be kind of sad. But there is also a very rare trinket off of the very first boss. So very rare trinkets are returning, very rare items are returning. There is one off of the first boss, which is any stat. Your attacks and abilities have a chance to grant you ephemeral dragon wings, increasing your crit and leech. And then it has an on use, a 3-minute cooldown on use that deals damage if you have traveled at least 15 yards. To crash to the ground below you, dealing damage to nearby enemies if you've traveled at least 15 yards. So I think that this is going to be like, if you're ever in a falling situation, right? Like something like Razagath knock between the platforms. You can use this to, you know, slam down, maybe not take fall damage, but also do damage to the things that you hit. But it also, yeah, it seems like most of the power of this trinket is probably just the stat stick part of it. It seems, from reading the on use here, it sounds like that's going to be situational. It's not going to be something you can just reliably press for doing damage, because it has that only if you've traveled at least 15 yards thing, but kind of unclear exactly what that means, so I'll have to actually play with that thing, which of course we can't do yet. We're just reading these, so that's this video. We're just going to read stuff. We're not going to play with any of it. Okay, next boss is Molgoth. Molgoth has an Elementium Pocket Anvil, which is a strength or agi thing that gives your spec filler abilities a chance to cause an echoed flare a moment later, dealing damage to your target. And then on use, you can permanently increase the chance of those procs happening, and that chance is significantly increased for 10 seconds after each use. So you have this low proc rate damage proc, then on use, you can permanently increase for the rest of combat that proc rate, and also temporarily increase for the next 10 seconds the proc rate by quite a bit. And then this effect stacks up to 5 times, so after 5 minutes, you're no longer getting that permanent benefit, but presumably you can keep getting the shorter term benefit. So tuning dependent, this has the look of something that would be probably quite a good single target DPS trinket, especially for stuff like Demon Hunter that gets good value out of these sorts of proc rate things. Probably a little bit less for specs like, well, I guess it depends on what filler things are being targeted, but usually these sorts of things, good for Demon Hunter, bad for like Windwalker, historically. Okay, Vessel of Searing Shadow. This is an int trinket that says your harmful spells have a high chance to draw unstable flames to you from the vessel, increasing your haste and dealing damage over 15 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Unclear here if the dot and or the haste part are both being stacked up by this, but potentially they both are. And the damage over time, is that being done to you as well? It's called Unstable Flames, so probably, right? Probably this is a trinket where you are gaining haste and putting a dot on yourself. The dot is quite small, which makes me think it is self-damage. Then upon reaching those 5 stacks, you launch a Shadow Spike at your target. Yeah, okay, so you're gaining 5 stacks of both the haste and the fire damage over time on yourself. But as that damage ramps up, once you reach the 5 stacks, you launch a Shadow Spike at the target, consume the flames, and you deal damage to them immediately and also additional damage over time. So this is going to be an int haste stat stick with the haste value kind of fluctuating. It does come with a little bit of self-damage on top of it, and then it also does do some damage to the targets as well. So probably quite a good caster trinket. It seems like a pretty low amount of self-damage too, so probably not something that will be on too many death logs, but maybe something that because you'll only ever have 4 stacks of this at worst, right? And then the 5th stack gets consumed. You're back down to safety. So that's and I mean that would be what, 4,000 damage over 15 seconds, worst case that you'd be taking. That's only a couple hundred damage per second. Like there's no way that this thing is scary to use. This thing looks pretty good. Okay, up next is the Experimentation of Drakthir. This is our first tier token. It is gloves this time around. And in here we have, in addition to a nice little Warglaive and shield, I guess let's talk about weapons. So first boss had Polearm, had Strength Polearm, and Agi Dagger. Second boss had Agi Staff and Strength Mace. Third boss here has an Agi Warglaive. Would love to see a non-Agi Warglaive. That would be a neat trick. And a shield and an offhand int piece. Then we also have a trinket here. This one doesn't have a name yet. Placeholder 10.1 raid, Drakthir Evolution Accessory Trinket. So this one is all stats, and it resonates with the power of the Chosen Dragonflight, granting 590 secondary stats. Allies with a different resonance gain secondary stat. The effect does not stack on the different resonance thing. And then on use, you tune it to resonate with a nearby Dragonflight Oathstone in the Dragon Isles. So the Oathstone, maybe, I think there's 5 of them, but I don't remember. Maybe one of them doesn't exist or something in the lore. There's the one in the Obsidian Citadel, one in the Ruby Life Pools. Yeah, I think we've visited 5 of them. Maybe we didn't. Maybe there's only 4. Because I'm thinking one could be associated with each secondary. And then also you want to have 2 people in the raid, each with a different one that have... So you get that little bonus of the extra secondary stat from having a different resonance ally nearby. It reads kind of like the Whispering Incarnate icon, but unlike that item, it is not very rare, or at least it's not currently tagged to be very rare, but likely this will be a very common desired trinket for a lot of specs because it's just generically powerful, just a straight up stat stick. Again, we'll have to see how the secondary, like how it chooses which secondary, whether it's got one static one or whether it is based on the Dragonflight that you align it to. Okay, 4th boss. And again, we don't actually know I don't think we know the structure of this raid, so we don't know. Oftentimes the dungeon journal order is not quite exactly the order that these get done in. But usually if there's a boss that requires killing a previous boss to get to it, it will be below that boss. So that's usually how these things work out. So 4th-ish boss potentially here is Akali Invasion. This one has an Agi one-handed axe and a bow. We also have Zakali Chaos Grapnel. Nice little name there. This one is a strength trinket that on use, it's a 1 minute 30-second cooldown, but a lot of strength specs actually kind of don't mind operating on a 1 minute 30 cadence, especially like DPS warriors. So hurl the grapnel, impale your target, dealing physical damage and heaving them towards you with tremendous force. On impact, deal volcanic damage split between all nearby enemies. Volcanic is fire in nature, if you're wondering. Impact damage is increased per enemy struck up to 5 enemies. So does that upfront damage get done unsplit to all targets? Or, oh no, okay, impact is, I see, okay. So the physical damage is to a single target, and then it grips them towards you, which is a very cool effect to put on a trinket. That sort of thing seems like it will be extremely potentially desirable for Mythic Plus type situations. And then the impact damage is split damage, but it's increased per target struck up to 5 enemies. So this creates a little bit of that, still getting some value from being an AoE, but not, it's not like one of those insane AoE trinkets that is just purely good in AoE. It's one that's just, it's kind of soft capped beyond 1 and hard capped beyond 5 in terms of how much damage it's actually going to do. Okay, next boss, Rashock here. Notably, Zakali Invasion here is not a tier boss, so Rashock once again is. This is the leg boss. It also has an int mace and no other weapons from it. This is an early contender to be one of the less valuable bosses, although it's worth noting that apparently there's a two-handed agi staff. Yeah, okay, here it is. There is a very rare two-handed agi staff that comes from this boss, so that will be, I guess, most of the value from this boss is likely to be this very rare agi staff. No effect on it as of yet, but I suspect it'll probably gain some kind of effect over time here that'll get added to it. But so in addition to the int mace and the very rare two-handed agi polearm, here we have the Rashock's Molten Heart, mythic. This thing is an int trinket that is a healer trinket. It says your healing spells and abilities have a chance to restore mana, invigorate your target, healing them over time, for quite a bit as well. Any overhealing is unleashed upon expiration, granting your ally up to quite a bit of verse for 12 seconds. So quite a good effect here. This thing is going to increase the damage of your raid quite a bit, increase the survivability of your raid by quite a bit. Quite a nice little proc on this healer trinket, depending on what healers are into. Yeah, sometimes healers, they just want stat sticks. Sometimes they're looking for damage trinkets. But this one seems to be a nice mix of one that is bringing some HPS value. It's restoring a little bit of mana, although 43, not very much mana, unless this thing procs a lot. And then also granting versatility to the person that's going to be good defensively and offensively. So reads quite well to me, but I'm not a healer, so I'm not 100% sure if that will be a super good one. It's the only one that won't be good for DPS, though, so healers are better like it, because that's the only trinket they're getting out of the raid. At least for the first few months. Okay, up next is a chest piece boss. It's a Skarn. This boss has a gun, a dagger, an int dagger, and a strength one-handed axe. It's also got a trinket with critical strike and nothing else on it so far. Some kind of effect that we will see. It's called... So, yeah, it has the word Trap Master in the name, but all of these items have the word... Actually, the other ones say Dragon Kin Trap Master. This one says Dragon Spawn Caretaker, so it's a Skarn, presumably. Yeah, he's kind of like Painsmith. He uses several deadly traps, so maybe that trinket is going to have something tying into that. Oh, we'll see. But, yeah, no idea how this thing works yet. Magmorax is up next. This boss is the Helmet boss. It has a one-handed agi fist weapon, a one-handed int mace. It also has Igneous Flowstone. This is an agi or int trinket. Very rare to see those two secondaries on the same piece. It steadily gains or loses tidal lava attunement. Stacks increase to 45 before diminishing to 0. At 45, your next harmful spell or ranged ability grants you crit rating for 12 seconds. At 0, your next harmful spell or ranged ability launches a lava wave that grows in size as it travels, crashing upon your target, dealing a boatload of volcanic damage split between all nearby enemies. Now, it depends a little bit on the numbers of this. The fact that they chose 45 maybe makes me think it's like 1 per second that you're gaining or losing the stacks, in which case, you know, you're sending one of these waves every minute and a half, and you're gaining that crit rating for 12 seconds of every 90, which seems a little anemic to me, but we'll see. This kind of thing could be a good like healer DPS trinket as well, so we'll see how that thing works out. Okay, next boss. It says Neltharion in the Dungeon Journal. It says Echo of Neltharion in other places as well, so yeah, I think that's what it's a visage of the Black Dragon still resides within the Crucible, waiting for the opportunity to continue the work started long ago. This is a cool fight. There's some cool stuff happening in here. Callbacks to like Nefarion's class call mechanics in here. It's also got Ashkandar, Fall of the Brotherhood, which is a callback to Ashkandi, I think, right? Ashkandi, yeah, this thing from Blackwing Lair from Nefarion as well. So very cool little callback there. So that is a two-handed strength sword. We're also looking at a shield from this boss as well. Then there's an offhand int piece. There's this trinket, the Ward of Faceless Ire, which is any stat trinket that has on use a 3-minute cooldown to give an ally a massive shield. If that shield is broken as well, it deals a little bit of damage over time to the last enemy to break the shield. So potentially a good effect here. This is the kind of thing that you would use as or on a tank that is tanking stuff like the Broodkeeper Diurna smash. Those sorts of things that are potentially quite valuable. Outside of situations like that boss specifically, I don't think that on a 3-minute cadence you would really get enough value out of this thing to justify using it, but it is the sort of thing you would use as a tech choice on that sort of fight, maybe. Okay. This boss also has 3 very rare trinkets. Each of these very rare trinkets are associated with certain classes. Each class gets 1 of these on their drop table. And the first one is a crit trinket for warriors, paladins, mages, DHs, and evokers. So you'll notice it's not balanced like 4-4, because there's 4 here. Oh, it is. It is balanced 4-4-5. So this one is the 5 class one. This one says, in addition to giving you some crit passively, your AoE spells and abilities have a chance to grant you strength, or presumably agi or int, for 12 seconds. During this time, damage you receive is increased by 5%. So a lot of stats, but 5% increased damage taken is quite the scary thing to add onto this for progression situations. So this is the sort of thing where I suspect that early on, these are going to go on like Havoc Demon Hunters, because they're naturally quite tanky, and then later on, this is going to be a good trinket for kind of just everybody for doing a lot of damage, but for progression, I suspect it's going to land on tanky players, tanky specs. Yeah, I guess the question is going to be like, do you take this out of your vault even if you're like a tank player or something like that? I don't know. We'll see. That will be an interesting question if that happens. Next one here, the Idol of Debilitating Arrogance. This is a verse-based trinket. It's for rogues, priests, DKs, and druids. And I love what they've done with the part of this. So it's a verse trinket, and it says your harmful debuffs, periodic spells, and abilities have a chance to grant you strength over time, or primary stat over time. During this time, you do bleed for a lot of damage over 12 seconds, for 60k damage over 12 seconds, quite a lot. But this goes on rogues, priests, DKs, and druids, all of which have dots, right? Those are all dot classes, so that's pretty cool that they have like this class thing that is not class specific, but I think this is really, really sweet design. Again, very powerful. Again, quite a substantial drawback. Something though, especially something like a Blood DK, actually DPS DK in general, maybe doesn't care too much about having this dot on them. A lot of these specs can be quite tanky. I think that for progression situations, you do need to pretty seriously consider the drawback of this. But obviously, everybody in your raid is going to want one of these so they can do a lot of damage with it, because presumably that primary stat proc is going to be quite valuable. But yeah, I mean, this is a nasty drawback as well. Okay, last one is the Hunter, Shaman, Warlock, and Monk idol, the Idol of Domineering Arrogance. It is a haste base, and it says your summons attacks have a chance to grant you a primary stat over time. During this time, you are slowed by 10%. So this is potentially, depending on the fight, the least bad drawback, but also potentially the worst. A slow can be just catastrophic. So very situationally dependent, and it triggers off of your summons attacks, which these classes all have summons, right? Monk has maybe the least of it, but you have Zhuan and Storm, Earth, and Fire. You have Chi-Ji, Yuzhao, those sorts of things. You have the statues maybe count as this as well, although those don't attack, so they probably don't trigger this. And then, of course, Shaman has elementals, Warlock has demons, and Hunter has pets, so pretty neat way for this to work. If you look at this as well, you can see that it's got a higher value of primary stat than the other two as well, which makes me think, and maybe you can already see this on Wowhead from the data mine versions of this, but I suspect this is a lower proc rate, which means it's a little bit less bad to be a class that doesn't have a summon out all the time, because you'll just proc it once per summon or something anyways, and that you'll get still a similar uptime out of it, or a less bad uptime relative to the Hunters and the Warlocks. You just always have a pet out. Not 100% sure on that, but that'll be my guess based on the fact that it is a higher primary stat value. Yeah, again, the haste here on this, I mean, this thing looks really good for like Warlocks. That seems like a kind of insane trinket for them in particular. But yeah, we'll see. I think these very rare trinkets are interesting. It is an interesting puzzle of what you're supposed to do with them. They do come from the second to last boss as well, which means getting your hands on these things at high item level is going to be difficult, probably. Okay. Last one here. I guess if you get them on Heroic, you can upgrade them all the way up to... With the new upgrade system, you could upgrade them a little bit if you get them on Heroic, although you can only upgrade them to, like, 415 equivalent, whatever the first bosses are dropping at, so... But you could give them one upgrade step, and they'd only be 8 item levels lower than the Mythic version, not 11 or 13 or whatever. I don't know. Interesting. Okay, last boss, Scale Commander Sarkareth, who has unfortunately... Yeah, the leader of the Sundered Flame, I don't know if has gotten corrupted or whatever. Yeah, draws in the power of the void and converts his ability. So maybe a little bit old god corruption and stuff happening here. I don't know. Spoilers, I guess. I guess a little late to say spoilers, but anyways, this boss has a two-handed Int Staff, a one-handed Agi Dagger, and then Envoy to the Empty. So potentially we're setting up a Void Lords or Old Gods Resurgence or something with this boss, or potentially that's just going to be this tier and not something that they continue going forward. I've seen like data mined or speculated infinite Dragonflight stuff coming in the future as well, which I guess would be a bit of a different direction than leading into like Void Lords and Old Gods. Also, it's only been like 3 years since we last did Old Gods. Also, we've killed all the Old Gods basically, but that doesn't mean they're dead forever, but whatever. Anyways, Envoy to the Empty. This is a mastery trinket with an on-use that is 2-minute 30-second cooldown. Quite a strange timer on that. Very few specs operate on a 2-minute 30 cadence, although a lot of good 2-minute 30 trinkets will just get used on 3 minutes, or potentially used on, the 1 minutes when they're up, or in rare cases, it's even worth holding them for your 2 minutes, but usually in that case, you just kind of send them both separately. It depends on the spec, though. Anyways, the way that this one works is it's not going to care too much about your spec at all, because the on-use here just does an absolute boatload of damage. It is split between all nearby enemies, but this is basically Grief Torch levels of damage, scaled up, obviously, to the higher item level. I guess we could look at Raid Finder. So the Raid Finder damage, yeah, you can see... Well, I guess this is 402. Hang on. Okay. How do I see... Okay, normal... 415. All right, so this is sort of comparable to my Grief Torch. So it's more damage at a comparable item level than a Grief Torch. It is, however, split damage, but it is increased per target struck, and it is split damage. So Potentially quite good there, potentially quite a lot of damage. 2-minute 30-second cooldown, though, obviously compared to Grief Torch, which was a shorter cooldown and which reset when people died, was hugely valuable about it as well. Also, this is a mastery trinket rather than a primary stat trinket, so I mean, I suspect this thing is probably going to be pretty good, but like there will probably be people in your raid who get some good value out of this. My guess is that this is the kind of trinket that you'll use if you like mastery and there aren't really other good trinkets for you, or if you get, mythic version out of your vault, you hold on to it for a while, but I suspect this will be in relatively few people's permanent BIS situation, unless they are, unless you're using it in the same ways that you used Grief Torch to like beat certain 8-second DPS checks, where it will still be phenomenal. This boss also has a very rare cloak associated with it, the Voice of the Silent Star, which is currently a haste verse cloak. Tanks of the world rejoice. I suspect this will get some kind of effect as well. This item and the two-handed Agi polearm off of the 5th boss, both are ones that I would be surprised if they didn't at least get a little bit of trinket text on them, a little bit of text on them that did something, but we'll see what they decide to do with that. So, those are the items out of Aberrus, the Shadowed Citadel, or Crucible. We also know that crafting items, there's some new crafting items coming in here, which we can look at with this handy crafting order UI. So first of all, they're nerfing Lariat. Lariat is being nerfed to only proc, instead of procking for 12 seconds, it procs for 5 seconds plus 1 per elemental gem. Elemental gems are everything except for the Illimited Diamonds. So that's, basically -1 for that. So you get 5 seconds plus 1 per each non-Illimited Diamond gem. And that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds at best. 8 if you're willing to drop your Illimited Diamond for an extra second of this proc, which I suspect is not worth, but maybe it is under some situations. Probably not, though. So at that point, if you're fully socketed, Lariat is unnerfed, even if you're using an Illimited Diamond, and you actually get the opportunity to swap out an Illimited Diamond and get your extra second, compared to old Lariat, if you're somehow a spec that really likes secondaries, really doesn't care about primary as much, which I don't think those specs really exist in the game right now, but you never know. I am not 100% certain about that. But it does mean that Lariat is not going to be an embellishment that will be super valuable for everybody on progression, or at least it will be more competitive with some of the other options, which I think that's phenomenal. I think that nerfing Lariat going into this patch, but actually keeping it, I mean, it's definitely still going to be long-term BIS, because long-term it's equally good, but making it so that you don't just use it for all the expansion. You take it off at the start of a patch, maybe put it on at the end of the patch. That seems like a really good place that if they didn't want to like dunk Lariat into the ground, this seems like a really good way to do it. So pretty excited about that. We also have some new cauldrons coming. So they're not cauldrums, but cauldrons. There is the Draconic File Cauldron, which is a file cauldron that you can take files out of. And the files are based on the recipes known by the alchemist when it's placed. So another nice little consumable for raid, although maybe you just still tell everybody to bring their own files, but I don't know, that's coming as well. There's the Cauldron of Extracted Putrescence, which is a thing that allows crafting of recipes that require the Altar of Decay. Great. This is really big quality of life, so you don't have to go to Brackenhide every time you want to do a Altar of Decay craft. Presumably this will work for, the leatherworking recipes and the alchemy recipes that requires decay, so that's cool. All right, in blacksmithing, we have some new stuff called Hellsteel. So this name, apparently this Bunker Buster name is definitely going to change, but it is a mace, a two-handed Strength or Agi mace with an on-use that deals Shadow Flame damage, and after a short delay, residual Shadow Flame will rain on a random location within 15 yards, dealing Shadow Flame damage to all enemies in an 8-yard radius. This effect can also damage the caster. So potentially good in AoE, although it's a random location within 15 yards, so potentially very good if you're like a Blood Decay and then you just run and mass grip everybody into that thing or something. I don't know. That's kind of a funny effect. There's also the Hellsteel Impact Buckler. This is an offhand that says taking damage has a chance to store stacks of Hellsteel Immolation. After 5 stacks, your next ability will AoE for Shadow Flame damage to all enemies in a radius, and that effect repeats for each stack of Hellsteel immolation. So it's kind of like Echoing Void that you build up to 5 and then spend as soon as you use your next ability. Notably, unlike Echoing Void, it's only on taking damage, not receiving or not giving damage. And also, if you don't use any abilities, maybe you could get more than 5 stacks out of this and just build up a huge immolation explosion thing. I don't know. Be an interesting thing to see if that's good. Probably not something that ever actually comes up in practice. Then there's, other Hellsteel things there. Other crafting reagents. Okay. There's supposed to be something called the Hellsteel or Heat-Resistant Rescue Ring. But that's not in here, so maybe it's not crafting orderable. Maybe it's something you buy off the auction house. All right, whatever. There's some new cooking recipes, which also aren't in here. There are some new enchanting recipes, which... Okay, this is also not in here. The Shadow Flame Wreath, don't know what that does. Spore Tender, don't know what that does. Baton. Okay, Spore Keeper's Baton, which is a wand that says your spells have a chance to activate the spores inside the baton. If you're aiding an ally, the spores are a proc that will give them verse. If you're attacking an enemy, they'll instead do a dot and shield you. So a cool, I guess, healer wand embellishment is the idea for this. It does, I guess, not say unique equipped embellish on this, on a few of those, but I assume these are all embellishments as well. Okay, then we have the crests, which I don't know are in here. Crest. I guess they're not in here yet, but you can basically the reward system. If you want to look at the upgrade video I put out yesterday, enchanters can turn the crests that you use to upgrade your gear to certain item levels into crafting reagents that you can use to upgrade crafted gear through recrafting or crafting for the first time to the same item level-ish. So like the heroic, normal, mythic, LFR ones all have that ability, although actually only a few of them can be enchanted, because some of them, like apparently, so the LFR crest can be enchanted and then can be used on the blue crafting recipes. You can't actually enchant the normal Shadowflame crest, and then the heroic and mythic ones you can enchant and use like you used the Primal Infusion and Concentrated Primal Infusion as an optional reagent to bring crafted items up to heroic or mythic level with the Spark ones. Okay, engineering has... There's the Shadowflame rockets. I don't know if this is new, but hop onto a ramshackle plank of wood with a Shadowflame fueled rocket attachment haphazardly taped on. Absolutely nothing could go wrong. This seems like maybe Gunshoes Tinker, something like that, available here. Then we also have Hissing Rune, which I assume is one of the stats. So there was Buzzing Rune and there was like a Crit Rune and a Haste Rune last time. Maybe now there's an extra one, like a Mastery one or a Verse one or something, because I don't think there were those. There are the adaptive. Okay, there's some leatherworking recipes. There are arm guards, adaptive Dracothist arm guards, but it doesn't look like they're in the crafting order thing. There's Spore Colony shoulder guards, also not in here yet. There's a new armor patch and a new armor kit. Don't know what those do. There's some new combatant gear that you can make, presumably with all of these things. There's a parachute. I guess can be used as a parachute. Yeah, okay, there's the Spore Cloak here. That is a new embellishment tailoring recipe. This one says, when you're above 70% health, you gain leech and heal over time. When you're below 30% health, these expand, or the spores expand and give you a shield for the next 10 seconds. This effect can only occur once every 2 minutes. So this seems like potentially a very good tanking cloak embellishment that you can get here, a nice defensive effect that gives you leech and healing at high health. Now above 70% health defensive stats, that's not usually all that good, right? Because when do you need healing and leech? It's not when you're above 70% health on most tank specs, although some tank specs don't mind having that extra value at high health. Stuff like Brewmaster in particular is one that I would think of as one that would maybe appreciate having that hot and the leech even at high health. But then the below 30% effect, giving yourself sort of a cheat death shield proc thing below 30% once every 2 minutes, could potentially be quite good if it's a big enough shield. So we'll see if that's something that gets tuned to be good. And that is it for these. That's it for these new effects, as far as at least the ones that were in the patch notes. So, yeah, quick little scroll through, see if there's anything else that's purple and new. Nothing that looks like it to me. So yeah, we'll leave this video here, as it is starting to run long. I'm sure there are items and stuff that I've missed, but figured I'd do a video like this where I just went through all the new items and stuff. Hope you found it interesting, and thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.